All right, I hope you all had a great weekend, had some good food at Easter, and enjoyed your nice 3-day weekend. But now we are back in class and ready to focus. So we have already gone over the answers to page 710. And now we're going to go over the answers to our homework, and we're going to kind of use this as a review before we get started on today's lesson or today's lecture. So at the top of the page it says a letter tile is chosen randomly. Find the probability of the event. Write the answer as a fraction, percent, and decimal. So you can see over there we have those tiles, and we need to find the probability of selecting D. So I have one tile right here that I can select D. So I have 1 out of my total, which is 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7, 8, 9. So that goes on bottom. So the answer is 1/9 as a fraction. As a decimal, it should be 0.11 and then 11%. So that is our answer to number 1. Number 2, we have the probability of selecting S, V, or L. So you can see right there we have 3 out of 9 tiles. That can be reduced by 3 on top and bottom. We get 1/3 as our answer, which is 0.33 as a decimal and 33%. Okay, our number 3, we have not selecting D. So all of the choices that are not D. You can see there I've highlighted 8 out of the 9 total. So this as a decimal will be 0.89 and 89%. Okay. Remember, 1 and 3 are complementary events because they both can't happen at the same time, but one or the other has to happen. I either have to select a D or I don't select D. Okay? Number 4, the probability of choosing a go back 1 space card in a board game is 25%. Describe the complement of this event and find its probability. So the complement would be the probability of not selecting a go back 1 space. Okay, since they have to equal, the complementary events have to equal 100%, I'm going to take the 100% minus the percent of actually selecting a go back, which is 25%, and that will give me the probability of not selecting a go back. So 75% should be my final answer. Okay, I did ask you to do number 5, and it says explain the relationship between the probability of event and its complement, and then give an example. So this could differ for everyone. The probability of an event occurring or its complement occurring is certain to happen, so it has to happen. Either I select a D or I don't select a D. One or the other has to happen. So their complementary event and the event occurring has to be certain or 100%. Something that we could say for an example is if there's a 30% chance of rain, then the complement is 70% chance of no rain. So it's either going to rain or it's not going to rain. All right, we are going to go ahead and move on to couple more practice problems, and then I will give you time to work on your assignment. So you need to be on page 715 following along with me. If I get going too fast, you can ask someone to come up here and push pause so that people can catch up, or if you need to ask questions, go ahead, raise your hand. We can always pause it and restart it. Okay, so on page 715, again, you are writing everything I write down, okay? So it says the spinner shown is spun once. We're only spinning it once. Find the probability of each event. Write an answer as a fraction, percent, and decimal. So here's our spinner. We need to find the probability of spinning blue. So I have 1, 2 options of spinning blue. So that goes on top of my ratio. I have 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7, 8 total outcomes. So 2 out of 8. Okay? I can reduce both the top and the bottom by 2, and that gives me 1/4 as a simplified fraction. I can write this as a decimal of 0.25 and as a percent of 25%. Okay, a lot of us know 1/4 as a decimal and as a percent. If it's something that you need to type into a calculator, go ahead and do so. On number 2, we have probability of red or yellow. So again, I am looking at my spinner, and I'm going to select the reds and yellows. So you can see right there, I highlighted 3. So I have 3 favorable outcomes, and I still have 8 total outcomes. 3/8 cannot be reduced, so I'm going to leave it as a fraction. If I type in 3 divided by 8 into my calculator, I get 0.375. If I'm rounding it to the nearest hundredth, my 5 tells my 7 to go up, so I'd round it to 0.38, and then I'd write it as 38%. Okay, if I go on to example 3, or number 3, sorry, the probability of not brown. Okay, I don't have any brown in that spinner. So the probability of not brown is all 8 of them. So 8 out of 8. 8 divided by 8 is 1. So that is what I would write as a fraction. As a decimal, I would still write it as 1, but then as a percent, I would need to move it 1, 2 places, and then fill in with zeros. So the probability of not spinning brown is 100%. Okay? The probability, number 4, of not green. So all of my options that are not green. Blue, red, yellow, blue, red. So I have 1, 2, 3, 4, 5 options. So 5 out of my total, which is 8. I cannot reduce 5/8, so I'm going to leave it. I type 5 divided by 8 into my calculator, and I get 0.625. I'm going to round it to the nearest hundredth. So the 5 tells my 2 to go up, so I'm going to put 0.63. To change it into a percent, I move it 1, 2 places, and I get 63%. Okay, before we move on, I know the directions didn't ask you to describe it in words, but if you remember from our lecture on Thursday, we talked about words like impossible, unlikely, as likely to happen as not, likely, and certain. So if we were to go back and to describe these, remember, if you need to look back on page 712, it has that spectrum there for you. So if we were describing this one is our number 1, sorry. If we're describing number 1, we have a 25% chance of selecting blue. Would you say that is impossible, unlikely, as likely to happen as not, likely, or certain? We would say that that's unlikely because that is less than 50%, but it's not impossible. So this one we would say is unlikely to happen. Not impossible, but not probably gonna. Number 2, we got 38%. Again, if we're looking at that spectrum, it's not impossible, but it's not quite 50%. It's less than 50%. So we would again say that it is unlikely to happen. Now number 3, the probability of not brown. It's 100%. It's gonna happen. It's certain. There's no way that we are gonna roll brown. So this one we would say is certain. Number 4, we got 63%. So this one, it's over 50%. It's greater than half. It's more likely to happen than to not happen. It's more than that. So we would classify this one as likely to happen. Okay, so again, we're taking our words that we talked about on Thursday and we're describing them to situations. Okay, so number 5, it says refer to the table on air travel at selected airports. So suppose a flight that arrived at El Centro is selected at random. What is the probability that the flight did not arrive on time? Write the answer as a fraction, decimal, and percent. Explain your reasoning. Okay, so we're going to look at our table, and we see that El Centro, it arrived, the percent on time is 80%. So the complementary event to that would not arrive on time. So again, we're going to take 100% minus the percent it actually did arrive on time, which is 80, because we got that from our table. And that will tell us the percentage that it did not arrive on time. So 100% minus 80% is 20%. So there was 20% of the time it did not arrive on time. Now, we are going to take our percentage and change it to a decimal. So here's my decimal, my percent, and I have to move it left twice. So I have 20% or 0.2. Now to write that as a fraction, how do we say this decimal mathematically correct? We would say it as 2/10 because 2 is in the tenths place. So I can write that as 2 over 10, 2/10. This can be reduced by 2 on top and bottom. 2 divided by 2 is 1. 10 divided by 2 is 5. So my fraction is 1/5, my decimal is 2/10, and my percent is 20%. Okay, it said to explain your reasoning. So since 80% of the flights arrive on time, that means that 20% don't arrive on time. That's our explanation. Okay, so what you are going to do now is you are going to get your homework assignment and you're going to have the rest of the class period to work on it. It is going to be lesson 1 homework practice. It is all of the problems. Okay, you may work quietly, and if you have any questions, let the sub or Mrs. Springer know.